Greetings, Ranger fans, and welcome back to another edition of Database Rangers Power Reviews, where we take a look back on our classic episodes of Database Rangers Power Reviews as we count down the 100 weeks to the 100th and final episode. Welcome to those of you who are in the chat so far. Welcome, Jenny. Welcome, Lex. Interesting correlation. I'd have to analyze that Go theory in terms of the direct relationship or inverse relationship between the number of times Go is said in a show and how good it happens to be. Welcome, Chris. Good evening. I hope that everyone has had a good week. As far as my side of things, I've been hard at work on episode 96. I've filmed, I think, close to 8 hours worth of footage at this point. Hard at work, just processing through all of it, chopping it down, getting all the takes sorted out. So making solid headway on that front. But I still have a ways left to go. I was planning a filming session for tonight. Unfortunately, it got postponed, but hopefully by next week I should have everything filmed for 96. It's definitely been a little bit more of a undertaking from filming perspective than I intended, but there's been plenty of editing to do in between, so it's not like it's putting me too far behind the expected schedule. I'm still quite optimistic about hitting the target date on episode 96. I'm just gonna have to start taking a look at the effect shots to see how long those are going to take before I can really give that concrete confirmation that it'll be out by the end of February. But it's coming along. It definitely is. So with regards to how the week has been, we had my parents up visiting for the 3-day weekend last week. And as a result, we had all 4 grandparents, all hanging out together, and little RJ, took their first steps. Somebody's a little walker now. Not quite consistently, but they have been toddling around a little bit during the course of this last week, so that's been pretty exciting on our side of things. Also, on a separate note, my birthday gift, which had been pre-ordered back in July, finally arrived, which is a very specific Power Rangers figure that I may or may not choose to do a little video about, just because it has been so long anticipated. I'll put it that way. But I hope that everything is doing well for everyone. I don't think there's too much else in terms of big Power Rangers news going on right now. We are sort of in that little limbo zone between the first and second season of Dino Fury. You know, they're switching over to Netflix. We have no idea when they're going to be releasing the season 2 episodes. We have no idea when we're going to be hearing about what comes after Dino Fury. So it feels very much like a lot of Power Rangers stuff is sort of up in the air. But in positive news, if you hadn't seen it already, they did get nominated for their first ever GLAAD Award for outstanding children's programming, I believe. So that is big kudos to the show. And I'm looking forward to seeing if they manage to secure the win. They're definitely up against a lot of tight competition. There are a lot of great shows on the list that I saw. But, yeah, Power Rangers first ever, after, nearly 30 years, first ever GLAAD Award nomination. So I'm glad the show stepped up this past year and earned that nod. Now, from there, let us jump into to our little section of the Power Rangers world, kicking things off with, as always, our 3 equally non-controversial phrases. So, number 1, say it with me, chat. Black lives matter. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Fascism is bad. And number 3, say it with me, chat. Superheroes are fun. As long as you don't knock their helmets off. That was a little bit of an awkward little... Anyway. So, let us check back in with our favorite superhero, one Mr. Database Ranger, with episode 62 of Database Rangers Power Reviews. Our review of episode 7 of Power Rangers Super Megaforce, Silver Lining, Part 1.
Previously on Power Review.
One of our very few instances of addressing a two-parter. Since this was, to my recollection, the only official... No, not the only one, because we got Vrak is back later. But I think in terms of two-parters, we basically just have Silver Lining, the Vrak is back two-parter, and the Origins two-parter. And then Island of Illusion done as a single episode.
Ooh, are those bananas? I told them ghosts were real. You must have given them enough sedative to knock out a galactic. Ready to go to work? Let's do this.
There we go. And now, one of the most amazingly ridiculous plans we've ever enacted.
Greetings, Ranger fans.
All my praise to Chris Kowalski for his performance in this episode.
Sure this is going to work?
Trust me, everything will be fine, but you need to stay in character.
Fine.
But I still say that invisible or not, people are going to notice that something's wrong. You clearly don't know Dr. C. This is the same man who consumed an entire pizza's worth of sedatives. No one will notice a thing. Where did you get that recipe anyway? Bananas? I wish I knew. My life isn't exactly an open book. You can say that again. Now remember, don't speak unless necessary, and just try to stay calm and focused. Right.
This is just so much fun because he has to act as if there's somebody else there doing his every motion. And I'm doing his voice the whole time.
You know what they say about the dark cloud? Just gotta think of episode 7 of Power Rangers Super Megaforce.
And as per usual, this is that was filming over by our old college. It's always the every Alphabet Soup location is over at our old college because of course they are. And yeah, with regards to who the other shows that Power Rangers got nominated against, I know Owl House and Amphibia I've both seen and are both very good. Centaur World is also surprisingly good. Better than it has any right to be, honestly. And, of course,
We need to cross the cafeteria? Just stay calm.
Of course, all of the random agents walking past the camera are just me and MJ walking back and forth several times over. Because, of course, we are. And, as you may notice, I have a pizza box that I'm holding, and if I recall correctly, yes, that is the leftover pizza box from the previous episode.
Oh yeah, totally normal. And while his classmates are quick to thank the Power Rangers for their good fortune, Troy is equally quick to point out... Note how he didn't include himself in that statement. Great job keeping your cover there, buddy.
And just, Chris was so willing to just roll with whatever I was asking him to do. Like, okay, you need to walk with your shoulders constantly held up like somebody's got their arms underneath your armpits, and then you need to dump your head into a garbage can.
Apparently not seeing the point of morphing before charging into an area full of civilian workers, the Rangers arrive at the warehouse district, but are shocked to see that all the exports have already been dealt with.
And nobody at the first security
I
checkpoint.
guess they all went on break.
Before they have a chance to question any of the workers, Tensu calls the Rangers to another export attack downtown. Once again, finding the same results.
Yeah, by the way, once again, I have been watching Gokaiger, and I have now watched the
It's a shame the Rangers
the
are
introduction
next,
of
they once again leave the
of
scene
the
of
of
attack
Gokai
without
Silver.
questioning a single
And I do
witness.
find it interesting that it's basically a 5-part arc to fully introduce
Says the guy with the
Gokai
secret
Silver.
identity.
And I wonder if that's at all a deliberate choice, considering
Says the guy who's just met two past
the
Rangers
introduction
in the past
of
two episodes.
the original Green Ranger.
Anyway, as they
Although
head
I'm not
to
sure if
break,
DRI was also
Gia
introduced
gets
across the
bumped
course of
into
5
by a
episodes,
guy
just
who
like Tommy was.
obviously has no understanding of personal space.
Okay. Sorry again.
Totally still not suspicious at all.
Looks like we're clear.
It's
Security's got the
it's also just really fun whenever we get to make use of something that was thrown in there as a random gag.
Don't know. Wait around long enough to find out.
Because I didn't really realize it back when I first introduced it. But if you think back to episode 28, which was the first episode, which was the episode we did in the restaurant, that was the first time that it was mentioned that Database is capable of doing pitch-perfect impressions. And so that was when I realized, oh, not only could we do this bit with Doc... So later on, when I was thinking about this plan of how to sneak in using Dr. C as doing a whole Weekend at Bernie's bit, but I realized that not only could we have him walk around using Database Ranger's invisibility power as the Phantom Ranger, but also using his vocal mimicry powers that had already been established back in episode 28 to voice Dr. C.
Yeah. Nobody seems straight on whether it's one or two, but I can't tell you how many times someone has tried to convince us that this place is haunted. Rookies.
So completely
And of course we have to have Agent H, Agents H, setting him up, and that is and those two were played by Steve Hennell, who's a good friend who you may recognize from Power Rangers Grid Defense, where he played Commander Jarvis. One of the very few actors that I have had crossover as characters into different in two different projects. I believe it was outside of MJ reprising their role as Dr. K in Grid Defense. I also have Betsy Bartlett as the council, or as the oh man, I blanked suddenly on the character name. But I had her as both one of the directors of Alphabet Soup, and then also in Grid Defense, because Grid Defense is in the RPM universe, and therefore it wouldn't create a conflict.
Until they all get fed up with this spicy game of hot potato and activate Super Mega Mode, giving Jake the added edge he needed to grab hold of the bomb. Just in time to
I do find it kind of amusing how many bits of original footage they actually did end up using in Super Megaforce, considering how much they sort of skipped over from Gokaiger. It feels like there's a lot of stuff they could have used that they just sort of chose not to.
Which they do.
Building out the fight scenes more than they already were, and just really limiting how much actual character footage they filmed. Also, now having seen his counterpart in Gokaiger, it really is. Orion and Guy are just such different characters, and it's really interesting that they decided to make that choice. This was a surprisingly tricky bit, actually, to do, if I recall correctly.
Dr. C, grade 7 clearance.
Because we had to do the retinal scan, which was really tricky to somehow line him up and make it look like it was like it was someone holding his eye open.
Seeing just how ineffective their assault has been against
Because when you think about it,
Jake decides
you know,
that enough is enough, and
making it
tackles
look
himself,
like someone is holding your eye open without actually having their eyes being held open by somebody else is a bit of a tricky effect to pull off. So you see, we had to kind of play around with how wide his eye was open, smash his face into the window, and have him fall down as the door is opening.
The prince is very disappointed.
The timing on that was
And although
challenging.
Damaris initially tries to defend
And I
her,
loved using, as I mentioned back in when we were talking about episode 38, I love using the big freight elevator doors as barriers to some hidden areas of Alphabet Soup.
Meanwhile, the Rangers discuss the nature of their new potential ally.
And yeah, Scott, the body language of Guy really does not match up with Orion's character in many regards. Also, I'm fairly certain that screaming and running agent was me. Because, generally speaking, if there is an Alphabet Soup agent and you cannot see their face, they are almost certainly me. But yeah, this was a fun shoot of just finding wherever we could within the various buildings and making them work as best we can. And then, interestingly, if I recall correctly, we weren't able to film everything at the college. That little bit with Guy sitting down and typing at that 2-monitor workstation. If I recall correctly, I believe we actually filmed that at Dave's apartment. Because I think we ran out of time to get it done, and so I believe I brought my monitor over to Dave's apartment, and then we used that with his monitor to create the double monitor setup, and it was just, as you can see, the color balance is very different.
Sorry. Something funny with never mind. Finally cornering him.
And of course, I just kind of technically I just sort of dropped Dr. C during that one moment when he falls over.
Surprise, surprise. That raggedy guy whose face we've never seen before now. And that's the end of our episode. So, what did I think of it? Well,
have you been watching Power Rangers inside your head again? What? No. What would make you say that? Alright, fine, I admit it. But you wanted me to keep calm, right? I suppose that it's fine. Sir Screams-a-Lot was the last agent in the sector, and I just ran K's new looping algorithm through the monitoring systems. Just like you, we should be invisible now. By the way, don't you worry about fingerprints on all
this is such a fun plan.
I got rid of mine a long time ago. Now let's get the good doctor here back to his lab and wrap this thing up.
I do love that little bit.
It wasn't too bad. In a lot of ways, the new Silver Rangers introduction is an admirable homage to many of the
Oh, the echo of that hallway. I probably could have found a way to tone down on that echo, but I'm not really sure what would have been the best way to do it. Just because of where we were filming. There's a lot of elements where I do wish that I could manage better sound when we're doing various scenes over at the college. And it's fun that I'm giving this analysis all in Dr. C's voice. But also also, as you may note, all of this analysis was recorded over at the college, whereas most of the time analysis would just be recorded as a voiceover with everything else. Vandalia next week is the meltdown over the Q-Rex, which I refuse to actually consider the Q-Rex. And Rudy, no, I definitely did not expect Beast Morphers to exist. I was 100% doing Grid Defense because I thought that there would never be an adaptation of Go Busters. Made no sense.
I guess that's true. I just always figured that the Space Rangers would have relayed some details of their time on Terra Venture. What are you talking about? When they teamed up with the Galaxy Rangers. As far as I know, only the Red Rangers of those two teams have ever worked together, and that was in addition to the moon. Really? That whole thing with them traveling to Terra Venture to fight the resurrected Psycho Rangers? News of that never made it to Hexagon? No, it didn't. But we'll have to share info on that later.
And again, we're just sort of floating this idea of alternate histories.
Terra Venture? Giant space colony. Thousands of people. Crash landed on Miranoi's moon after passing through a couple interdimensional rifts.
Ooh.
2 of them? Is that going to be a problem? Hopefully not. I'll just have to work fast. All right, then. Let's put them down over there and get to work. Right.
Glad that part's over.
And here we got our CG helmet back.
What was that?
If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say it's one
There's a
of those
very
ghosts.
brief glimpse
Although
of the
they say that
ghosts,
so quickly.
which are just
My stuff.
little
Preparing to be
little
activated
bits
stabilizers
of the T agents just flashing by there very briefly. I wish that I had shown that off a little bit more. It was only there very briefly.
Sounds perfect.
Ready with the wireless interdimensional interface, mobile off-site transmission equipment.
Yeah, it is weird that Beast Morphers never referred to themselves as the Beast Morphers.
Ready and deactivating stabilizers.
The CG on Phantom has definitely aged. This is also the first time that we've seen the second version of the Phantom Ranger suit.
God, look out.
And here we go.
T Alpha. There you go.
Dun dun dun! Little cliffhanger there. The sudden, unexpected return of the T-Agents as a single entity, T Omega. T Omega. That I'm still quite pleased with that sudden little reveal at the very end. Database wasn't quite able to seal both portals quite quickly enough. And so as a result, we ended up getting the escape of T Omega through the portal. Yeah, I still marvel at just the absurdity of the premise behind some of these individual episodes surrounding Dr. C. Obviously the pizza episode is very wacky, but then this one too, I'm just like, okay, for this episode, you are going to act as if somebody is using you as a human mannequin. You are going to flap your mouth whenever you are supposed to be speaking, and then you will be dubbing over your own voice later, except it will be my character that you're technically speaking as, who's pretending to be your character. The second Phantom costume, yes. Basically, going into episode 62, I wanted to make sure that I was prepared for episode 63, since episode 63 was going to be Phantom's first physical battle. And the initial costume that was originally made for me by Dan Romano, who I'm no longer in contact with. That costume, it looked fairly nice, but it was not form-fitting. And so, while I liked the texture of it, there was no real chance for me to be able to fight in that. So this was my first attempt at making my own. I was fairly pleased with it, although I wish it had a better texture because it was very cardboardy. I didn't cover it in foam. I tried covering it in sort of a resin coating just to give it that sheen. But But I really, in retrospect, should have given it a foam coating, which I ended up doing with the third version that gets introduced in episode 85. Um, but yeah, it was definitely a process to get this prepped. This is technically the spring season of year 2, but at this point the schedule had already slipped considerably. We didn't really get started on year 2 until March, and then this is only the 7th episode of Super Megaforce, and it was, I believe, around July that this one got released. So like the summer saga didn't come out until technically the fall. Although it did start, I think, in early September, so the summer saga still technically started in summer. But these were just much more challenging episodes to put together. I had to assemble a new costume, and this was a pretty challenging costume to put together. And a big reason that I had to prioritize it was to make sure that I would be able to film the fight. And then this was also around the time that I started to lose actors a little bit. Tom Dixon, who plays the T agents, was moving away, and he was going to be moving away that summer. So we wanted to make sure that we got. I think he was moving away that summer. So we wanted to make sure that we got everything that we could for the T agents in advance. So we had to really work and make sure that we honed that fight scene that we'll be seeing in the next episode. I think we might have even filmed something from episode 75 during that summer before we left. I can't remember if we actually filmed that in advance or not. I would need to double check that one. And then we had plans for him to come up during the Christmas break, and for us to film his farewell fight for episode 80. But the big priority was obviously 62 and 63. And as I believe I've mentioned before, one of the big incentives for the introduction of T Omega was to have some character who could function as Phantom's first monster. I keep trying to make it into more and more of a Power Rangers show as it goes along. And after introducing Phantom as a Power Ranger, he needed somebody who he could fight. And as I believe I've mentioned before, very early on, I was thinking of having like a big field commander character for the Soup Agents before the person who I had in mind backed out. My backup person couldn't make it. And so the character who ended up getting the kick in the face ended up being Guy, who was the only one who had that built-in level of intimidation rather than the physical intimidation. And so I cut the whole idea for the storyline of a character who gets kicked in the face in the field, feels like he needs to prove himself, and then goes through cybernetic modifications to get back at database. So instead, I had to think, okay, what character can I use? And I ultimately settled on using T Omega as the merging of the T agents, since I had already well established the two T agents as being a threat, and that still functioned in the same way. But yeah, I'm still a little disappointed in myself that the ghosts only appeared for like that quick split second, because I did actually put a bit of effort into that little effect there. It was a very blink and you miss it. So not my best bit of editing on that front. But it was also, a lot of different things to film. We had the CG of the Phantom. We had the whole thing of building the Phantom's new costume, which was tricky. I remember having that like positioned out in front of the apartment building, so as I was spraying it down and like coating it in resin to try and give it a sheen, and it still had the corrugated cardboard texture no matter what I was doing. And I think I got paint on the. Actually, I think there's still. Yeah, I can see. I actually have the little TV trays rack. We've got little TV trays at all my various laptops are sitting on right now. And I had rested the costume on the TV tray rack that stores the 4 TV trays. And I actually can still see a little bit of spray paint on the rack from when I was making that costume. Which, I mean, that was some... What was that? Yes, I should have used better drop cloth. This is true. It slipped. The drop cloth slipped off. But yeah, that was back in the summer of that was 2014. That was nearly 8 years ago that I was working on that costume. But yeah, a lot of this this season is trying to just sort of tease and ramp up the threats, and build towards that big first fight with T Omega, because I always, once I had the idea of breaking things down into multiple seasons per year, I knew that I wanted my spring season to end on the big monster fight. And so I need to build up that setup, even if it was a little redundant by virtue of making use of yet another tear once again over at Alphabet Soup, although in this case it was 2 tears, and we had the fun little plan with Dr. C. But I do also like just the slow unfolding of the multiple timelines, because I knew that all that stuff would be confusing, so I figured it would be best to release it in little bits and pieces as we went along, for the fans to kind of follow along and try to seem to be buffering. Well, that's not good. Okay, there we go. Finally stopped buffering. Nope, no, it did not. What is going on here? Not receiving enough video for smooth streaming. I don't know what's going on there. Okay, I have no idea what's creating this issue with the internet right now. But we are nearing the end of things. And yeah, it's under size screen is actually good. But yes, thank you all again though for joining me for this. I hope that this was an interesting one. That just so much of this episode just came down to Chris's performance, as he's wandering around trying to pretend that I'm using him as a human puppet. But as we do wrap things up, as I can see, the internet is getting very dicey. And then next week we'll be taking a look at the big showdown against T Omega, which honestly I love some of the stunts we managed to pull off in that next episode, so I'm looking forward to talking about those. But for right now, thank you all for joining me this week. I look forward to seeing you next week, and before we go, let us not forget our other 3 equally non-controversial phrases. So, number 1, say it with me, chat. Love is love. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Trans rights are human rights. And number 3, say it with me, chat. Robots are cool. Especially if they can somehow do a mannequin, a human marionette effect by being invisible and faking their voice. I actually come to think of it, robots can be kind of terrifying sometimes. Everything about this plot is mildly terrifying if you think about it a little too much. But we'll get more into it next week. But until then, farewell, Ranger fans, and let the power protect you.